Anyway, point is, I think I'm doing all right at the moment, but we'll see.
Oh, well, I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you so much for hopping on at such a, well, hopefully it's not too weird a time, but either way.
No, yeah, 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is good.
Oh, perfect. Well, I know like we have a lot of things we're super excited to talk about with your piece at our tech house. But I guess for anyone who's maybe tuning in and not really sure what's going on, could you introduce yourself and a little bit about why you're here?
Yeah, my name is Jess Wiseman. I primarily do 3D and animation and digital work on Instagram. But as a whole, I generally say like designer because it kind of covers most areas. I enjoy physical paintings and digital and 2D illustration, but yeah, I mainly at the moment do a lot of 3D animation and work in Blender. And for Art Tech House, they were inviting like a range of really awesome artists to create a immersive exhibition for New York, where it's kind of hosted this space where you can create a huge 18K animation, and it's essentially an immersive experience where people can come in and experience an animation in a new form rather than just watching it on a screen, just actually being able to sit in a room and experience it, which I think was, I mean, that was really awesome, because I think especially for a lot of digital artists, you tend to see your work on a very like linear like screen, or like there's not a lot of like formats unless you go into the music industry and you have like concerts and really big kind of screens to display your artwork in. It's really cool to have an experience where you're not so much creating an animation for like a soundtrack or whatever. You're creating it for people to experience the art in a more kind of immersive way. And I thought that, yeah, that was really awesome. And I was super excited to be brought on to it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, we're super happy to have had you here. How did you get introduced to the Render Network? Like, was it Render Network first and then our tech house, or vice versa?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was Render Network first. I seem to remember someone spamming on Twitter that because I was having issues with my rendering a really big file, and they were like saying you should use Render Network. I think I reached out to Render, or they reached out, I can't remember, on Twitter, and yeah, I got introduced to Sunny, and I'm pretty sure that was the wiggle room in.
And what, so that was like this year about, or last year?
Yeah. I think it was earlier this year. Most likely, I think around January. I think.
Mm,
Yeah,
nice.
we're huge
Okay.
fanboys.
Yeah.
We're talking about Jess all the time behind the scenes. Huge fans. It's great.
Well, I'm glad the spamming worked.
I
That's like
appreciate you,
so
mate.
awesome. How has it like been like work since working with Render Network? I mean, like you obviously have been doing this for quite some time, so it's a little bit of a recent shift. Like, what's that been like in your creative process? Like, where have you really seen
It's
that change things?
Yeah, it actually has made like a huge difference, because I think for ages when I used to have not as great of a PC, I kind of learned to optimize my scenes anyway to try and render it all on one PC. But being able to multitask and have something rendering while you work on something else, that I think that's the main thing that's been a game changer, because like oftentimes I would probably hit render and then it in a way, it's kind of a good thing, because it gave me an excuse to be like, oh, now I have to go outside and like I have to walk because I can't do anything now because my computer's rendering. But now I don't have that excuse anymore, because which is a blessing and a curse, I guess, because now there's no excuse to go outside.
Yeah, literally
But at the
chained to
same
your computer.
time, yeah, now it's like there's no excuse. Now it's like you can just get as many things rendering kind of in the background, which I think is amazing, especially for a lot of artists that don't have like a powerful computer. Having something that you can send it off to and use someone else's system is like a huge game changer, I think, for a lot of people. So because it basically means you don't necessarily need to use your own powered system to render things. You can design or do whatever you want on your home computer, and then have them to keep designing while it gets rendered in the background, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah, no, entirely. And like, I mean, since working with our tech house, you hear rendering is this big daunting thing, which is such an intense process. So like I'm sure also using it in this piece too made an entirely big difference. And I think that's something you've talked about before with just like this experience, or something you try to communicate to people is like anyone can do what you do. Like, you know, like it's just
Yeah.
learning those tools. Like I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what specifically that means to you.
Yeah, I think that's always my main goals with kind of what I'm sharing on social media is to kind of break down the barrier between um, people feeling like that something is out of reach. I think a lot of times Instagram became this platform where you'd only show like the final products of things, or you'd only care about the grid or how it looks, or very much this like facade aesthetic of like how you want to present to the world. And I think a lot of times it can put people off starting because you get these like really beautiful, amazing looking content on Instagram, but it kind of creates this huge gap between where you are and where someone else is. So I think kind of really trying to focus on showing to people, and I think that's what I was kind of aiming to do with a lot of the talks I've done earlier this year, and also when I went to the Blender conference, was just being able to show people behind the scenes on the workflow and how I make things is very messy. It's very not proper. And a lot of times I'm taking a lot of shortcuts, even for things like because I can't remember how to do something, or and it's like I really want it to kind of humanize the process, because I think for a lot of people they might feel like I don't know, that they don't information, or they can't do something because of a certain like powered computer or whatever. And there definitely are limitations, but I think a lot of times limitations allow for a lot more creative ideas to come about. If you had, you know, the best computer, the best everything, I think a lot of times that actually is more overwhelming because you now have no kind of you're not bound by anything, and so you're not thinking on the spot on how to create solutions. And a lot of the things that I learned back from when I had really like a really bad computer, I still use to this day, because like they taught me ways to speed up my process and to do things more efficient. And it doesn't matter if I have a good GPU now, it's like the skills and the things that I learned from having a bad computer I might not have ever ran into if I hadn't have been in that situation beforehand. So yeah, I think I want a lot more people to realize that what I'm doing isn't out of reach, and I'm just trying to create and be in that creative space as much as possible, and less so much in the space of working out how to do it, but more just doing it. I'm trying to just act on things more and not worry about what the final outcome is. Obviously, I still struggle with that, but that's kind of my goal, is to, you know, just go at things and not worry too much about how to do it, and just try and stay in that creative bubble as best as I can.
I love that. And it actually ties really well into a question we got in the chat, which is about like what your biggest motivation to create is, maybe when you're feeling a bit like down or uninspired. Like, are there any specific life hacks that you use to kind of push yourself out of that comfort zone to keep creating?
I think a lot of the times it helps being in habits, because I think if you're relying on motivations, that can be the biggest flaw, because then you're relying on you feeling a certain way, and you can't always, you know, wake up and guarantee that you're going to feel good or feel not good. I think getting myself into habits, where it's not reliant on how I'm feeling, but more just reliant on doing things regardless, has helped me get through a lot of times where I didn't kind of feel or felt stuck. I just knew by doing, you kind of, I think for me especially, I get a lot more anxious if I am not prepared for something. So a lot of times if I'm feeling anxious, or I haven't or I'm worried about starting something, it's normally because I haven't began, and so I'm kind of like in my head about things. Whereas I think when you start like stacking that kind of evidence of you can do this, and just by doing small incrementally, like it doesn't even need to be like a big jump, you just go into it and tackle at it one little chunk at a time, as regardless of how small it is. I think just doing the really baby steps can help just like eventually build up the confidence to for your own head to be like, oh, you know, I can kind of go at it. I think a lot of times also I tend to zigzag. If I feel a bit burnt out in a certain area, I tend to just pivot to something else, like entirely different, where I'm a beginner again, because that like beginner mentality helps me feel like there's like a endless roof of progress. So if I, you know, spend 4 weeks going down one avenue and then I start feeling burnt out, switching to something entirely different where I suck and I'm back at square one, in a weird like reverse psychology way, actually kind of helps me, because I'm like, oh, you know, like I'm at step one. There's like endless amount of things I need to do. I know that I'm a beginner in this area, and knowing that you're right at the bottom and you have like loads of stuff to kind of progress upwards through is actually quite rewarding. It gives you a lot of dopamine, especially at the beginning, to because learning any skill, you're going to learn a lot at the start. So that's mainly what I do.
No, especially like, yeah, that beginner mentality I think is so important, because I mean we're creatures of habit, and also sometimes a little too judgmental, comparing like, you know, project B to project A that you did like just a couple months ago, by taking a new angle or really putting yourself into a new situation. Like, yeah, that opens up so many possibilities, and like I think really creates some cool things. I would love to hear like, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, was this your first like immersive venture, right? Or
For
or
myself, yes, I
spatial?
have.
Yeah.
Well, I have done 3D animation work for Vex, which is
Mm.
an artist that he did. I don't know if he did it with ARTECHOUSE or through someone else, but he did a immersive experience with his doodle artwork, which I did the animations for. So the process of creating animations for the walls, I've done before, but not in this style. So I did it where he was doing it around a pillar, so it was easy to render, just kind of like flat planes that would you know, go all the way around. But this time it was a lot more kind of a new approach that I hadn't taken before, where you actually have to set the camera angle in a very weird way so that it actually is able to be laid out on all four walls at once. But yeah, this is my first time ever doing it like with my own idea, and not for someone else. Yeah.
That's so cool. I guess like I'd love to hear a little bit more of a breakdown about that process. You know, I think it's easy to be around it so much and be like, oh, you know, it happens. But like, what is actually going on when you're creating something like Cycle Reset?
Yeah, I think it kind of hones back to what we were just saying about like limitations allow for creativity that you probably wouldn't have thought of unless you had some kind of a restriction. And I think for me, the biggest restriction was one, time, and two, the actual, obviously, the walls of the building itself is somewhat of a restriction on what you can create. But it's quite a cool restriction because it's almost like not so I'd actually rephrase it. It's not a restriction, it's just kind of like a brief. You want to be able to fill up the walls in a way that feels immersive. I think my goal going into this was to one, create something that I really wanted people to feel like they were part of like a storyline, and it was more of a storyline animation than a visually kind of like a beautiful piece of artwork. I wanted it to feel like a story. And I also really wanted to make it feel as immersive as possible by kind of having these like sensory things going on. So there's a scene in the animation where you're in the viewers are kind of walking into like a microwave, and they're kind of being spun around, and the story of the animation is meant to kind of be like your viewer playing a video game. And so I really wanted to play around with just making as many cool like sensory things as I could, because I really enjoy kind of like the artifact billboard that they did, and a lot of these other projects where they've created these like really immersive looking billboards with the shapes that they got given. I think it was really cool to have like a really cool space that had huge walls and a floor space that you could work with. And so, yeah, that the limitation of time meant that I had to just be quick with whatever idea came to mind and just go for it. And also meant that I couldn't really overthink too much and just, create as fast as I could, but also create something that I'd be proud for people to experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I think it's been one of the most fun pieces to see inside the space because you really do feel like you're starting that. I mean, it says like start game, like you feel like you're being initiated into some sort of game. And we had like an event where there were a lot of kids and they were like absolutely going crazy. And like this giant robot coming alive on the screen. And that is a figure that's been in some of your past works, right? I'd love to hear more about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so I've kind of been with everything that I do on my Instagram. It always feeds somewhat back to my character IP, which I'm building at the moment called Figure, and it was a character IP that started with me and my brother creating these almost Pokemon style like cards when we were kids called Figuregots, and yeah, ever since kind of 2021, I've been incorporating and building that IP and pretty much just Easter egging it into everything. I'm kind of created a clothing line with it, created an animated short series of films that we released on Twitter, and I've created products with it. And so, yeah, I have a lot of assets and models around kind of those Figure characters that I've just been making over the last like 5 years. And so, yeah, that was one of the reasons it was in there, just because it's very fitting with everything that's I've been posting on my Instagram, and it's a IP that I'm really kind of strongly trying to build at the moment, because I feel like, especially in the era that we're in right now, with a lot of just like infinite content that we're creating with AI and everything, I think having an ownable IP is going to be quite important. So yeah, that was kind of the reason for having that in the animation.
That's awesome. And that ties into something, and I now scrolled way too past the username, but someone in the chat was wondering about your ideation process. So either bits that you're like, creating completely from scratch or finding a way to tie in figure-gotten things to this story. What's your process?
Yeah, so with everything, I try and initially just put things down on sketching as fast as possible. I really try my best not to worry about how the sketches look. It's at the point where you just have an idea and you want to thumbnail it to see whether it works or not. So typically I try and like not overthink that part and just get down ideas. I think after then I like to just have a kind of a debrief and have a look through the ideas and see what's actually physically possible. What could I build? What will I enjoy? Because I think at the end of the day, like you have to enjoy also the process of creating it. So what would be fun, what's something new that I haven't done before that might be fun to learn as an excuse to have it in this project. And I think that was also partly the reason I decided to do the popcorn was I actually didn't know how I would animate popcorn going from a kernel to the corn. So it was kind of a good excuse to be like, oh, well, this is a good reason to try and work that out in this project. And yeah, I think I normally go from sketching on Procreate to essentially just pretty much after that solidifying the thumbnails, having an idea, and just I always go into 3D knowing what the idea is like for sure. So everything, or a lot of the hours spent in like coming up with it will be spent not in 3D, and it will be spent in just like sketching stuff out. And I don't ever really start the 3D process until I'm like almost 100% certain on what I'm doing. And I don't normally deviate from my thumbnails once I start in 3D. There's times where I've added stuff in and removed things, but generally I'll have my thumbnail sketches and then I'll have an idea on what I kind of want the final outcome to look like. But yeah, I'd say a lot of probably like 60% of my time is actually spent in like the thumbnail bit first, and then I'm normally quite fast with trying to get the 3D animation out. I think for this it's a little more different because obviously you're dealing with 18K and big files, and you're wanting the actual you don't want there to be a lot of issues with you know, the 3D itself. So obviously that can add up time. But if we talk about generally my process for a lot of things, I think most of the time I'm spent in the idea phase, and then I'm pretty solid on the idea before going into 3D.
I think, I don't know why, but that's almost surprising to me, or goes against like what my brain would expect, that like most of the time would be spent in that 3D space. Someone commented your brain is different, and like yes, like that's why you're able to do such cool things. But did any of that process shift when you're like designing for the ARTECHOUSE canvas, which for those of you who might not know, it's a 270-degree immersion gallery with 18K resolutions, like millions of pixels. And it's, I imagine, very tough to like work on that perspective and imagine like a real human versus like what's going on the walls. Like, how did you work with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with it was for me was the understanding the walls and how the projection would align with certain walls, because a lot of times like it looks fine from the very stiff typical perspective camera view in Blender or any 3D software, but as soon as you start having this like warped camera lens where you're working with three walls at once, there's a lot of issues that I didn't foresee, like you know, the corners of where the floor meets has to align with the wall, and sometimes, you know, when a character's going between walls, it creates like this warping effect. I think with the microwave, it was hard to position the plate in a way, because the floor, it's kind of like an origami thing, where for the floor in particular, where you see it in the viewport as this like big straight line, and then when you're projecting it onto the four walls and the floor, it kind of like origamis into a circle. And so that was a bit complicated for me to get my head around at the beginning, for the plate on the floor, because I had to work out, you know, how it was going to warp and what areas might look really bad. But yeah, I think it was mainly just getting my head around the warping of the image, and because I had a lot of different files, that was the other issue, was it was kind of more of a storyline animation than it was just kind of like a art piece. So I had a lot of Blender files that I was having to, if there was an issue with one camera, then it impacted all my, you know, 6 other files that I'd been building in. So I think that's what actually took up a lot of time, was these files were quite big, and I had a lot of Blender separate files that I was working with and trying to stitch them together. And yeah, I think it definitely was very it was very time restraint, for sure, to try and get everything
Because you
done
guys
in
had
the
like
time.
45 days, right?
Well, I don't know if I had that amount, because I don't know, maybe I don't think, I definitely didn't have 45 days to work on it. But like whether I didn't spend that amount of time, or I was told earlier, I don't remember. I think I was working on something else on a different project when I was first told about it, and then I had maybe like a few weeks in total to get everything made. And then obviously there's a lot of technical issues that come around when you try and make stuff too quickly. So I think there was definitely a lot of things I had to fix, or as also the render house people had to fix, which I'm very grateful for.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I just saw Spencer say you rallied in 2 weeks. That's insane. And to be clear, I was saying the 45 days is like oh my God, I can't believe you did it
If I had 45 days, I'd be jumping for joy.
You would have built a real microwave.
Yeah, it was quite intensive. But you know, all good things at the end of the day come from some kind of intensive sprint. I feel like even I actually would rather have a shorter amount of time, because like we were talking about earlier, having those limitations means I can't overthink anything. I just have to work on it. I think a lot of times procrastination can happen when you have too much of a deadline, and you end up overthinking everything and spending too long and trying to do everything the perfect way. And even though this was perhaps not a 2-week project, that I definitely should have had a bit more, For myself, I mean, I probably should have like scheduled this in way more time efficiently. But in a way, it like forced me to be like, okay, well, this is the idea. There's no time to think too hard on it now. You just got to get it out and send
Yeah.
it off. And
No.
I think the tough thing was there was a lot of overlapping events going on at the same time. There was a TED talk going on the same week, and Blender conference was the weekend after. So it was all very it was pretty intense. That's yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could accuse you of not being busy. Like definitely.
I appreciate it.
No, that's awesome. And you touched on it a little bit of like, well, I kind of went after the popcorn because I didn't know how to animate it. But how did it end up coming together? Like, was there anything you were like, oh, this
Yeah,
is how I have to do it?
well, I was stressing because originally I went into it being like, oh, let's do it via geometry nodes in Blender, and I quickly realized that I was spending way too long, one, trying to like learn as I'm going, and I'm like, I don't even have time to be like properly sitting down learning how to make the kernel pop into a popcorn with geometry nodes, and I got to a point where I was like, I knew how to do it, and then there was a few issues that kept coming up with whenever they were popping, they were like they weren't intersecting, because the thing is with geometry nodes is that it's kind of like fake data. So a lot of the geometry node popcorns were kind of like going through each other, which I was like, okay, this is an issue that might take another like day or two to solve, or I don't know. It was basically, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go with a method that I know, which is shape keys in Blender, where it's literally just using like actual geometry, and you're just starting it as kind of like a flower, like a little petal, and then it explodes into its like corn self. So I ended up actually scrapping the geometry node setup, even though that was way more kind of enjoyable for me to learn that process. But I was like, I'm not willing to use up crucial days on try to work something else, which is like 10% of, or like 20% of the whole thing. So yeah, I ended up just doing a method of shape keys and particle system, and I knew obviously that was a much more laborious computer powered way of doing it. So I wouldn't recommend if people were doing it unless they had like the render network to be able to render it on. But I ended up doing that way. So trade off of computer power, I was like, I knew I could send it off to the render network. So even though it was going to chug my PC, I knew that wouldn't be an issue for this project.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like, I guess we just need to set the record straight on what the popcorn represents. If anyone looks at some of our reviews, some of them are like, what does the popcorn mean? Like, I've been trying to wrap my head around it, and I love that people are taking it that deeply, or
Yeah,
really.
I really like that they're taking it
Yeah.
literally as well, because even for me, I'm like, yeah, what is it? Because it's like I basically, like, when you guys first came to me with the shape of the building, I just wanted to have something where I wanted the people that were in the building to feel like they were inside something, because I think you don't get a lot of chance, like I was saying earlier, to animate in a space where you're actually a human within like an animation. So I think I kind of like, I could have definitely gone down the route of just creating something like aesthetic that it would be cool to like take pictures with, but I just really wanted, because I hadn't done anything like this before, to do something where it felt like you were a part of something, or you were in something, so that's why the space kind of reminded me of the shape of like a microwave. And so I was like, okay, I kind of very initially had the idea of like, oh, why? So it's kind of like, what? Okay, so why would they be in the microwave? And it was kind of as the case of, I had something that I wanted to do fast, and I kind of reversed backwards and tried to fit everything in to allow it for me to and as an excuse to be able to create a microwave and have popcorn. And so it ended up just being like a very like a solo mission game where you're a robot, and level 1 is you're finding this popcorn, and it's just a very kind of like funny, playful, sensory animation experience of, you feel like you're part of a video game. you're driving this robot around this kind of very like sci-fi looking room that kind of turns into a laundromat, and you're searching for this like food. And yeah, it's kind of just very fun, very much a process where I just wanted to enjoy making it, I think, number one. And again, I didn't have much time to dwell too much on the idea, and just to go for it and try and make it as good as I could in the time that I had.
That's awesome. And I mean, like, there's that connection. Our tech house in New York is a transformed boiler room. So there's definitely that, like,
Oh,
heating
really?
element to it. So it's fitting.
Yes, definitely thought about that.
Yeah, no, it was, well, I mean, clearly the idea is just the popcorn was very intentional and well thought out and meaningful. And no, but I do love that perspective of like wanting people to feel like they're inside something. And I think that that is
Yeah.
a potential of like immersive spaces, is getting to engage with art in a different way. And I'd love to hear, yeah, like whether just through this experience with our tech house, like how do you view immersive spaces in conversation with your artwork or artwork in general?
Well, I think first off, I want to do more. I think this really like inspired me to think about animations in a different way. I think a lot of the times, like I was saying at the beginning, you think about how you don't really think too much about how your artwork is being shown. I think a lot of times you kind of assume, obviously, people are viewing it over like a phone, and there's not, and so you kind of just take that as default as the experience that most people will view your artwork. But knowing going into it that it was going to be not a phone experience, and it's quite hard to actually share the animation on Instagram for that exact reason, because it's like the animation is so like warped and weird that it's like I'd probably have to re-render it for the just for people's sake to see it on Instagram, because it's like it doesn't kind of make sense in its like raw form as it is right now, because it's so warped because of the setup. It needs to be projected onto walls for it to be viewed, and in a way that's like really cool, because you almost have this like exclusive experience of this animation by seeing it in person rather than over the phone. And in a way, like I would have made this entirely different, and it really changes how you make the process on your ideas and how you make the animation, depending on how it's going to be viewed. If this animation was done purely for an Instagram reel, it would have been an entirely different process and probably would be an entirely different theme. And it really changes how you approach what you want to create, because it's very exclusive and very like original to be able to walk into a space and see an animation. So you have to approach it from a different angle. But in a way, it's cool, because it wasn't anything that I'd done before, and like I said, it's really inspired me to do a lot more and think about how my animations will be displayed. Because I definitely had done in the past. I did like a year and a bit of being in the music industry, and that experience did have a very similar vibe, where you're designing less so much for your like how it's seen on a phone, and you're designing purely for the space and how it's gonna interact with the music. And a lot of the times you have to think about your artwork entirely different. You have to worry about the color space, and you have to worry about knowing the environment and the dimness of the lights, especially in the music world, of kind of how the colors look in certain like rooms or whatever, that you don't really think about. I think sometimes I'll just animate on a really like light background, but then when you see like a super light background on a huge screen and at a concert, it just washes everything. So you have to start approaching your ideas and your colors a lot differently, because it's designed for that space, which I think is what's cool about this. Is like it's designed to be viewed on the walls, and it's not designed to be viewed on multiple platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and whatever. It's very kind of like exclusively for that space. And in a way, it made me think about how I approached it very differently to how I'd approached an Instagram reel, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I'm curious like how that maybe changed your relationship with the viewer, or you know, the consumer of your art?
Yeah, I think it definitely made me consider also like how high things need to be and how big scale wise things are going to look. I think I oftentimes was, especially with this project, was just kind of building and then I'd forget that the robot, even though on my screen it feels like it's only slightly high, it's going to be like huge and they're going to be looking all the way at the top to see it. And then you then worry about, oh, like, is there areas it's going to start clipping out? Yeah, there's a lot of factors which I would just go default into how I'd normally make stuff, which I'd have to then reverse backwards, be like, wait a minute, this is going to be huge. Like even just worrying about how fast something plays and having enough time for people to breathe between each like scene was something which I didn't really consider until one of the team members from Artifact was just like, Art Tech House was like, yeah, it sometimes can be quite disorientating for scenes to be like really quick between each one. Sometimes it's actually, and that was just something I didn't consider, the fact that there might be needed like breathing room and times of pauses between each of the animated shots. But yeah, there was a lot of things which I think I fell into the trap of just making how I normally would, and then having to kind of take a moment to work out how to build it in a different way to meet kind of how it was going to be presented on the walls.
Yeah, like, you know, different context, different set of rules, I imagine. But it's
Yeah.
so cool to see. And you know, I hope that everyone gets a chance to visit Submerge and you know, step inside the video game and the microwave. And also, like, you kind of mentioned it loosely, but your voice is like in the experience, which I realized very recently, which is so cool. Like all the things that you crafted yourself to make this world come to life. Just awesome.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an example of you know, limited time and having limitations to be like, well, I want, you know, this thing to happen, and don't have much time to think about it. I just gotta like act and do it, otherwise it's not going to be in the space. So that was kind of the reason that I ended up using my own voice and then just changing it yeah, within another program in order to make it not sound so much like me. But yeah, there was quite a few things. Like there was something which I really looked at before this call to remind myself on some of the things that I changed, or things that I did that might be slightly Easter eggy. I think one of the things was the microwave plate. As it spins round, normally the microwave plates say for use only in a microwave oven. Like normally that's it's like imprinted in the glass, but I changed it for the Art Tech House, where it actually reads as you're spinning. If you'll see kind of the text, it'll say for human use only at Art Tech House. So there's just a few like things which I just customed for the space that people probably wouldn't notice, and definitely didn't notice. But I enjoy the fact that they're there, so that's all that matters.
That's awesome. No, I'm literally like, I feel like I've looked at these experiences so much, like every day. And you saying that, I'm like, oh, wait, let me look back at the photos. Like, I never noticed that before. That's so cool. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I want to open up for some questions if anyone in the chat wants to ask anything. I saw a couple questions I unfortunately didn't stop our conversation for. One was what your favorite movies are. And two was what colors you prefer to work with.
Well, first off, favorite movies. I feel like I'm very cliche. One, in being a big stan of Chris Nolan, and I'm a huge just kind of like sci-fi nerd in general. So, like even my favorite Marvel movie is Doctor Strange, and because it really gives that the warping of the buildings. Like I'm a huge fan of the animations and the style of that movie, and I feel like it's very underrated. But yeah, of course, like Interstellar and Tenant, and I also Breaking Bad is like one of my favorite TV shows, and Better Call Saul. I really enjoy kind of a, like a storyline where you feel like you're working it out as you're watching it. I think there's obviously times for just like comfort movies, but I really enjoy the ones where it feels like it's kind of like a puzzle as you're watching it. So those are my kind of general favorite genre of movies. And what was the other question? What was my favorite color space?
Favorite colors
favorite color?
to like work with and work in.
Oh, colors to work with. That's a good question. I haven't really ever thought about that. I'd say I generally like black mixed with paired with a lot of colors just to pop. I think especially for screens, less so much work with white and then other colors, because like I was saying to you earlier, there's like when you're working with screens, white really does just like flashbang people, because it's such like it's just bright. It's basically turns into a light. So I enjoy whenever I'm doing kind of screen experiences, having like really vibrant colors on really darker toned backgrounds. I think that's also kind of the reason I did the blue kind of X-ray view of the scene on a very black, and it's quite dark, because I think it makes the colors like stand out really bright. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but
I got some stuff out of it. I mean, yeah, I guess like I don't think about white being like very overwhelming, but it kind of is, especially in like a digital space.
Well, especially on screens, yeah. Like
yeah,
if you're doing some experience, it almost just becomes a light box.
Yeah, it's like a flashlight.
Like yeah, it was actually something that I was also made remade aware when I was doing some of my talks. Was like sometimes, because I had a screen behind me as for my presentation, like the whole room would be pitch black, and then as soon as your screen with a white background pops up, like the entire room just you could see all the crowd's faces again, which is actually a lot more daunting than if you just had a black drop on the back of your presentation, because then everyone remains in a black void. But as soon as you switch to the next slide and now it's lit up the entire room, it was actually quite off-putting to certain slides would just like light box the room, and then I'd see everyone's faces again.
Reminder, you're talking to a giant crowd.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, oh, that was one of those things which I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I should have stuck with the suggestion of dark PowerPoint, so then the room remains a black void and not reminding me that I'm talking to faces. So I feel like those are the type of things you just don't ever think about until you're in that weird kind of scenario where you're kind of doing a presentation in a black void.
No, literally, like you never would have thought about that. It's outside of that situation. We have one more question in the chat. If you made another immersive piece, how would you approach it any differently?
Well, I think I learned a lot from this experience in the sense of time management. I think 2 weeks for a lot of my other projects on Instagram is plenty of time. 2 weeks for this, not enough time at all. So very much always shout on about on Instagram, like making stuff quickly. I think for something like this, where it's everything is on show because it's 18K and you can look at it really close and you're a human walking around, I think I would love to have paid more attention to that fact and actually taken some consideration in how I would have, maybe move certain items to certain positions where it's more visual for like your the size of like an average human. I think I also want to have a more clearer storyline. I think if I was to go into it differently again, I think again that's down to a very much kind of like a limited time that was my fault. And it meant that I just had to act on whatever ideas was coming up. I think too ambitious with trying to make a huge like storyline animation, as opposed to perhaps having like 2 shots that were like I could spend a greater amount of time on each one, making those perfect in or not perfect, but as best as I can, putting more attention into certain shots rather than splitting my effort between lots of areas, which I think became my demise with this project. Was I went into it with like an idea of making this whole like storyline, but it meant that each scene didn't get as much love as I'd have really wanted to have given it. So yeah, those are the main things. If I was to do this again, would probably narrow down my scope of how much that I wanted to do, and instead put higher attention and effort into each one individually, rather than split the effort across lots of different things. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be viewed by people in a gallery slash immersive experience style space. So it's like you want each shot to have its own kind of like power, and to have a sense of like feeling with each one. And I feel like, yeah, maybe I could have done that differently.
Yeah, no, totally. We have another question in the chat, which I think might be our last one for the evening. Do you have any advice for someone trying to move from following tutorials to creating their own art?
Yeah, I think tutorials I'm actually, I don't know if it's like a hot take, but I think a lot of times tutorials aren't always the greatest move for beginners, because I think sometimes it can get you in the trap of like you complete a tutorial, you're almost not actually learning how you'd learn if you were to learn any skill in real life, because you learn quicker by doing it. And so when you follow a tutorial, you're almost like turning off your brain to why they're doing certain things in the video, and you're more turning on the brain of just replicating. And then you get to the end of the tutorial and you have this like thing that you've created from the video, but you haven't so much taken perhaps like the learnings from the video. And so it gives you this like false sense of like accomplishment. And then as soon as you go into creating your own thing, that sense of accomplishment kind of crashes down, because then you go like, oh, I can't like and I speak from experience, because this is how I feel like I felt at the beginning, where I was like, I felt like I had mastered everything by doing a tutorial, and then you go and try and make your own thing, and then all of a sudden you feel like you suck, because you actually realized that you didn't retain any of it, and you're actually just following someone, you're just doing it step by step. So I think the best way that I now approach kind of like learning a new thing is, yeah, tutorials are great because you need to know how to do it, but they're great for its purpose of what you need to use this tool for this. So it's very like linear. A tutorial is great for getting information on what is used for what or whatever, but it only really like absorbs into your head until you actually do your own project and you start taking those things that you just learned and applying it to something different from the video. So not copying what they're doing. You can copy what they're doing to get an understanding on like where the tools are or whatever, but I tend to learn a lot better by then having my own projects to implement what I just learned in, so that I can try and take the information and actually convert it into like learning, as opposed to just having it as information stored in your head, which will just disappear. We all know, like, as soon as you finish school or whatever, a lot of the information that was just retained in your head purely for information retention normally just like leaves, because you actually didn't implement it into like something that actually converted it into proper learning.
I remember literally like 2 days ago, someone was talking to me about like the unit circle, and I was like, yeah, I learned that song to pass like 10th grade, but since then I haven't thought about it. So I really love that, and I honestly like, I do think that is a little bit of a hot take, but like a valuable take about tutorials, and like how, especially now, I feel like information is so readily available on like the steps to take to do something, that really focusing on like how to understand it and translate like steps into like your own practice, and helping those, like having those building blocks that are actually going to result in something that you can use in other contexts is really important. Awesome. Okay, so
I agree.
we have one final question from Render Network. So we're gonna do that
Okay,
one.
awesome.
I feel like we have the partner requirement there. How did render change what was possible for you in terms of resolution, speed, or creative freedom?
Well, I think creative freedom, it was that was like the biggest thing because of those two other things. I think yeah, the speed and the ability to have multiple projects going at once allowed, as a result, for creative freedom, which I think was the biggest takeaway I think from this whole thing, was just being able to yeah, being able to have an idea and not worry, because normally, I mean, for a lot of artists, you have an idea, but then you also have to have the logistical brain side of you being like, can my computer actually do it in time, or can my computer actually render that? I think not even being like, not having to worry about that was really cool, because then it opened pretty much any idea to be created, because I knew that it wasn't going to be rendered on my computer. It meant that I could, you know, I didn't have to go down and optimize some of my files, which I do actually recommend. Like optimizing files and create and having a scene that isn't, you know, really high poly and isn't chugging is like 80% of the time what you should be doing. But for something like this, I didn't have to worry about optimizing my files, because I just knew that everything was going to be packed and sent to the render farm. So it meant that it really did take that pressure off having to worry about doing things in a way that wasn't going to kill my computer, which was nice.
I'm sure, yeah, that must take like such a big stress off that normally is like such a huge constraint creatively.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for spending this hour with us, Jess. I know before we go, we've got a 50% off code for anyone who wants to experience Cycle Reset and the 11 other works on View and Submerge. That code is going to be Tech Talk 50. I'm going to pop that in the chat. And this code will be good through the end of the year for Submerge tickets. For 50% off adult and kids. So definitely stop by in New York if you're around. You can find out all those Easter eggs that Jess was telling us about, and hear her voice in the experience. But yes, thank you so much. Any final words? Anything coming up next you want people to tune into?
Oh, oh yeah, I'm in Australia at the moment to do Node Fest, so that's next week, which is like a design festival. I'll be speaking there, so that's kind of my next mission at the moment, is getting that sorted. I also need to publish a YouTube video before the end of the year, which I keep putting off. But yeah, those are my two main missions, I'd say, at the moment.
That's awesome. Well, we will definitely stay tuned for that, and I hope everything goes smoothly. That you avoid the jet lag at all stages in this.
I appreciate it.
And hopefully we'll maybe see you in New York in the spring, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'd love to. Let's try and work it out. Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and we will chat soon. Just to say it again, the 50% off code is Tech Talk 50. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.